What's up, guys? Brayden with South Valley Photo here. I hope you guys are having a great day or night or morning or wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the vlog. Today is going to be a very fun tutorial. Let's just dive right into it. All right, guys. So we have Lightroom up. Let's dive into it. So today's video is going to focus on the basics panel. Now, the reason we're focusing on it is because if you don't understand the basics, you're never going to really be able to grow within the program. Now, the reason I want to go over it is for a couple reasons. One is no matter whether you use Lightroom or any other program, these are basic. I mean, even on Instagram, if you've ever tried to edit the photos through Instagram itself, these are basic tools that are universal no matter what program you're using. And so if you can get a good understanding of this, it's going to create a foundation for you so you can grow and create your own style. So very important, especially if you're just beginning out in automotive photography. Now, the second reason I want to go over the basics panel is because there's a lot of things that I see from new and amateur photographers, and complete disclaimer, I did those things myself and it is embarrassing. So I'm gonna shut up, let's just dive right in the program. Now, we've got this beautiful shot of this AMG GT. Now, this was shot up at one of our local canyons here in Utah, Alpine Loop. If you guys haven't been there, if you're local, if you're not, please come visit it. It is absolutely gorgeous. So let's dive into it. Now, the first part in this basics panel is temperature and tint. Now, what this little box covers, if you notice this little WB, that is white balance. Now, if your white balance isn't correct when you shoot in camera, what's gonna happen is you're gonna see a ton of blues, or you may see a ton of yellows and oranges. And the reason for that is because the camera has to adjust to the lighting to get the truest color. And so if that's off, the colors are gonna be off slightly. Now, luckily, the white balance for me in this situation was good. The colors look fine, looks very accurate to that day when we shot this picture, so I'm not worried about that. Now, let's say though, you did take the shot, your white balance was off, it looked blue. You're not doomed. All you have to do is take it to the opposite. So what's the opposite of blue? Yellow. So we're gonna go ahead and slide this up until it looks good here. I think we're around 5800. So yeah, we'll call it there. So now we're back to tones. You can see right here in the whites that there's not too much yellow, there's not too much blue. Likewise in all the colors right here in the shadows and everything like that. So we're good. Now likewise, if it looks too warm, you've got yellows and orange tones, you can take that down and bring it more towards the blues to help even it out. Same thing with tones. If you see a lot of greens, you can bring more magentas and purples into it, which will cancel out a lot of those greens, and vice versa. Anyway, so super simple. Now, let's jump right here into tones. Tones are super simple and straightforward. We've got exposure. Now, again, play with the slides. That's very important to experiment, try it out. You always can undo what you just did as long as you don't get too deep into it, but otherwise you can always reset the image. So let's just jump into that. Exposure, if we take it way too high, as we know, it blows out the image completely and it doesn't look that great. Likewise, if we take the exposure all the way down, we're pretty much working with the black image. We can't even see the car, so it doesn't help us in that situation. So we'll go back to 0. Now, it's a pretty well exposed shot. If I shot this a little too dark, I could bring it up. In fact, I was thinking that it was a little dark, so let's bring it up ever so slightly. Again, do not feel like you have to slide it all the way up one way or another because it changes the image drastically, because you're gonna miss out on certain things, and I'll go into that here in just a second. So we wanna bring exposure up just a little bit on this, just to bring out some more detail. Now contrast, this is very important because we can make the image look super flat, or we can give it a ton of depth and really crush the highlights and shadows. Now, for those who don't know what contrast is and what it does to the image, if we take the contrast and slide it all the way to the left, we're eliminating a lot of it. So we're taking all of the highlights, we're taking all the shadows, and then evening them out. So that's why we see this flat image here. Now if we take it all the way to the right on the slider, what we're taking is the highlights and the shadows. The highlights are getting cranked up and the shadows are getting cranked down. So if you notice on the wheels right here, you can barely tell that there's spokes or that they're even really wheels. And if you look closely on the hood, we lost a lot of those details in the body lines. And when you're shooting cars, and I really want to emphasize the body lines because that's the design, that's what makes that car that car. So let's undo that here. Let's take that back to our 0. I'm going to increase contrast a little bit, just add some depth. Now, just because we brought up the highlights and crushed the shadows a little bit doesn't mean we can't recover them. And let's dive into that next part here. So right below it, we have highlights. Now, if we take it all the way to the right, obviously blows out the highlights. We take them to the left, it crushes them. But if you notice here, it goes almost completely gray and really doesn't show that this car was white. So we don't want to do that. Let's take that back. But one thing I do want to show off here is there's a line that goes towards the middle of the hood. So we want to bring that back. So I want to bring those highlights down ever so slightly. And then that way we can bring out some more of those body lines. Now the next part is shadows. So with shadows, I can crush them or bring them out. But if we bring them out too much, you notice right here, we get some grain. It just doesn't look natural. And again, it kind of flattens the image. It doesn't look horrible, but it doesn't look good. So with the shadows, we want to make sure that we bring out enough detail in the shadows to show off things in the car that are usually darker. For example, the grille right up here. If they have black wheels, which is a really popular trend right now in the automotive scene, you know, we want to bring out some more of the details that are hidden within those wheels. Again, just really bring out some of those darker areas in the car to show off some of its features. For this, let's take it back to 0. You can even zoom in a little bit here, and let's bring up the shadows ever so slightly. I think that looks fine. Let's go back. You can do Control or Command Z, shows you the original, and then if you press Shift, Control, or Command Z, whether you use Mac or PC, it brings back that setting that you just had. I'm very happy with it. I do a little bit more refined tuning when it comes down to these, but just to cover the basics, I'm not going to go into those yet. So I'm happy with the image so far. Now, whites and blacks. Now the whites and blacks is very similar to the shadows and the highlights in the image. Just to kind of show off again, let's look at the hood while we're messing with the whites since this is a white car. If I bring it up, obviously completely blows out the whites. It's useless. If I take it to the left, crushes them quite a bit. Now we start looking more gray instead of white. Now, whites and blacks is a little bit more targeted as far as the colors and what we're affecting on the image than if you're affecting the shadows or highlights. But again, what we're doing with this setting is it's almost counterproductive. So if we crush the highlights but then bring up the whites, it's a little counterproductive and it's not something we're really going to do. But again, mess around to your taste, play around with it, and see what you like. So in this case, I'm not going to touch any of it. In fact, I actually might crush the blacks just ever so slightly on it. I think that looks good. Again, it's very subtle, but I'm happy with it. And one thing I do want to mention as well, the slightest changes make the biggest differences. So when you're going in, please do not feel free to get slider happy. You can tell, and you may think it looks cool in the moment because it's different. You know, think you're figuring out your style, but in reality, you're actually hurting the image. And for someone who's experienced in the industry, it's easy to catch. So just make sure you pay attention for that. And again, I'm not judging you guys. I am so guilty of all of this. Let's jump right back into it though. Okay, so the next part we want to go over is texture, clarity, and dehaze. Now texture, let's just play around with it. Let's slide it all the way to the right. So if you look here and pay attention to what happens, any textures, grains, sharp features that are in the image are being exaggerated, and if we take it to the left, everything looks super blurry. Now, I would say all the way to the left doesn't look that good. I mean, it doesn't look horrible, but it's not that great. Same thing with all the way to the right. Smallest changes make the biggest differences. So let's go back here. You can maybe add a little bit of texture. I'll probably bring that up just a smidge. It helps sharpen it a little bit, brings out some of the textures within the background, you know, shows the roughness of the asphalt. Now clarity, this is the biggest one, guys, the biggest one, holy cow, that everybody likes to mess around with. And why? Well, it's super easy. I made this mistake for the first year I started doing automotive photography, just because, look, when you bring it out, it really sharpens the car. It makes it look cool. The highlights and shadows are really brought out. You know, it looks different. Well, different always isn't that great in these types of photos, specifically if you're cranking clarity. So guys, please, and girls, you know, anyone who's watching this channel, please stop cranking that. 9 times out of 10 it does not look good, and in fact anyone who's experienced in the industry can see that right from the get-go, and trust me, they know, because we've all been there, so no sweat. With this, go back all the way down to 0. I do want to sharpen the image a little bit, so let's bring out some of that clarity. Now I'm happy with that. I usually do not go higher than 30, that's a personal preference of mine, but again, it's your photos, it's your style. Feel free to go in and make the changes that you feel like will look good. For me, I like to keep it under 30. I'm very happy with it right there. Now, one of the last parts of this little box is dehaze. Now, I don't know if any of you know what haze is, but you know that foggy effect or atmospheric effect when you look in the distance and it's kind of cloudy? That's what haze is. Now, if you're shooting during very harsh daylight and you're getting a light leak, and maybe it's affecting some of those details on the car that you can't see them as well, dehaze is great. Maybe you shot in a very, you know, smoky or foggy day. Dehaze is great because it eliminates a lot of that, so you can show more of the details. Now in this photo, we really don't have a lot of haze, so I'm pretty comfortable with not touching it all, but just for example purposes, we're gonna take that all the way to the right, let's take that all the way to the left, and you can kind of get an idea of what it's gonna do. Now again, for this one, I don't think we really need to use it, so we're not. Now the last part of this basics is vibrance and saturation. I'm not going to go into it too much. There's a lot of videos on YouTube, so please go check them out. If you look up the difference between vibrance and saturation, it's actually really interesting when you start to learn about it. But one of the things, again, that we see all the time from people who are just beginning their journey in the photography world, specifically in automotive, is that it's super easy to crank some of that vibrance as well as that saturation, which we get it. It brings out a lot more of the colors, you know, it looks different from the normal image. But one thing I will say is it does take away from that beautiful paint job on this AMG. So if we zoom in here and undo what we just did, we get really good whites right here. Now let's redo what we did. And now those whites look a lot more like yellow, which in real life, if you've seen this car, it's not yellow. That's bad. So we definitely do not want to do that. So we're gonna come here, we're gonna take both of those down. Now, I'm not saying you can't use them, but again, the smallest changes make the biggest differences. So I'm gonna bring it up just a little bit. Let's add a little bit more tone to it. Overall, is this an image that I would just leave and send out to a client? No, but this is something I'm very happy with and has given me a foundation to then go in and really stylize and edit myself. That pretty much covers it for today. We went through all the basics. Now comment below if you had any type of questions, if you were confused on any of those features at all. You know, again, the reason we went over this is it's applicable no matter what editing software you use, whether it's Lightroom, Instagram. These features are something that you're gonna see, even though they may be called a little bit different, across the board. Even in Apple's photo editor, you see these features. So again, like this video if you thought it was helpful. I want to see some of your guys' work, so if you go onto Instagram, tag me at South Valley Photo, and comment below what you guys would like to see in the future. Again, I'm going to be making a lot more tutorials, a lot more videos. We'll obviously go in a lot more depth than what we did on this, but I figured, look, we're in the beginning. Let's start out with the basics and kind of give you guys a foundation, especially for those who are just starting out. It's very important, and I don't want you guys to make the same mistakes I did. And trust me, I have made plenty. Awesome, guys. Well, smash that subscribe button if that's what you're into. Give me a thumbs up if you liked the video. Again, comment what you'd like to see going on in the future. More videos are going to be coming. Other than that, it's 2:20 a.m. where I'm at, so I'm going to bed. Good night, guys.